Genshin Impact tier lists. You either love them or you hate them. You put your characters into a tier and no one ever really agrees on what tier your character belongs in. But today I am going to do a tier list for all the Genshin Impact characters of the 3.3 patch, including Scaramouche and Faruzan, and I am going to rank them based on two things. One, how good are they in game in their utility, their damage dealing or otherwise, and two, how fun is the character to operate and how much joy will you get. So basically, in short, how much do I think you should pull a certain character depending on their meta position and depending on their gameplay. Now let's jump straight into this and start with Scaramouche. Now Scaramouche is the second Anemo DPS that we are really getting out of all the dedicated Anemo DPSs for the 5 stars, with the first one being Xiao. I think Scaramouche is actually going to have quite a similar position in the meta than Xiao, and he is definitely going to be strong. I don't think he is going to be meta defining, and I think he is a solid high tier S, because Scaramouche is going to be quite good and Anemo DPSs are quite nice, but I don't think he's going to shake up the meta like someone like the Raiden Shogun. Following that up, I will actually be doing Xiao afterwards. Now Xiao is currently the Anemo DPS, and Xiao is really good at dealing damage, definitely to grouped enemies. Unfortunately, he hasn't really blossomed much more from Dendro, but he is incredibly strong and he gets to sit right next to Scaramouche, currently above him as Scaramouche still needs some testing, at the amazing Anemo DPS and the high tier of S. These are in order, by the way, so left is the best of S tier while on the right is the worst of S tier. And then for the third character we are going over Faruzan. Now I think Faruzan is actually really good for one reason. She is filling a role that doesn't really exist yet. Faruzan is the first character that can buff Anemo damage specifically and strip those resistances. Even though the Anemo Traveler cult, Faruzan does it a lot better, and for that reason she definitely, I think, belongs in Insane S, because a dedicated Anemo support is new and really good. Now next up, Venti. Now Venti is another Anemo character that is pretty darn good. He can group up enemies, he has gotten a little bit more niche because his tornado doesn't suck in all the enemies, but he has remained to be one of the best Anemo units in the game since his release at 1.0. And all in all, he is great, definitely in specific teams. He does quite good things. The only downside of Venti, I think, is that he's not very much a generalist, and his gameplay is also pretty as it's just bursting and getting out. So I think he is currently in the middle part of S tier. Now next up is Jean, and I think Jean is a very strong A. Jean is a good Anemo healer and fills the fun slot for Anemo Resonance, has quite a good kit and can definitely heal really well as an Anemo unit. She can also swirl with that and do a lot of really great stuff. But in general, for the healer options, there are a couple of characters that outclass her in most teams, and thus she is quite niche and gets into the A class. And then next to that, we have Sayu. Now unfortunately, the best part about Sayu, even though some of her mains are very dedicated and that is very cool, is that she is very fast. But her damage and healing are alright, and she doesn't really define the meta. She's not meh for sure, but I'd like to put her in decent, because she can be quite decent if you put a lot of investment on her, but honestly, there are better options. And then there's Sucrose. Now, I was a bit on the edge of putting Sucrose either really high up on A, or on the lower parts of S, but I think she deserves to be in Insane S. And that is because her buffs are really good. She is by far the best 4-star Anemo character currently in the game, together with Faruzan, who I will now order like this. She can provide a lot of buffs to your team through damage dealing, applies the VV swirl set so the enemy loses a lot of their resistances, and in general is just a really strong character. But lacks the part where she can group enemies fast, and Kazuha does this a lot better. And here we have our first meta-defining SS character. I have nothing else to say about Kazuha than that he just does everything that an Anemo support wants to do, and he does it best. He groups enemy regardless of their weight, which is really nice. He can even group big chunky enemies. He gives your team a massive elemental damage buff, he does insane damage himself, and he strips. He does everything you want in a Anemo unit. And then we have Heizo. Now Heizo gets to be together with Sayu at the decent B tier. Why? Because I think Heizo is pretty good. But the Anemo main DPS concept with elemental reactions hasn't really been the strongest, and definitely not as of recently, as it doesn't really work that well together with Dendro. And I think Heizo is pretty alright, but he didn't really make waves in the 4-star world. Next up we have the Hydro element. So for Hydro, look, we're gonna start off with my main Tartaglia. And I am biased, but I genuinely think he has reached a point in the meta where he is meta defining. If you look at the current Abyss, Tartaglia is super strong. He is basically the best pick, and Tartaglia International is the team that is being played the most in Abyss at the current moment, as far as I think. It is because it's a very functional team, and him having a bow is actually really useful there. I think he's meta defining because 1, he's part of one of the strongest teams in the game, Tartaglia International, and 2, with a character like Nahida, he has really appreciated in value, and also, I'm incredibly biased, and it's my tier list, so I can put him there. Next up, we have Nilo. Now Nilo is good, but also quite niche and quite fun. I think Nilo is deserving of a S tier spot. She enables one of the strongest teams in the game, but can't be slotted into a lot of teams, and that is a little unfortunate. But what she does do is she makes your teams a lot better. And her way of buffing a reaction like Hyper Bloom to be stronger and to be different is a very unique design choice, and that's why she is an S. Next to that we have Candice, who goes into the lower part of B tier. I'm not too excited about Candice, her block is alright, but the rest of her kit is pretty and having a defensive hero in a game where time matters is pretty meh. Same with Barbara, going into the lower tiers of B, she can be a good healer and can apply Hydro quite well, but is outclassed by Kokomi and other characters with a long shot. Then we have Yelan, who, in my opinion, is almost meta defining, and Yelan might just be on the same plane as Tartaglia, but I'm quite torn between Insane S and meta defining, but I think I'm gonna put her in Insane S. She is really good, but honestly Yelan just does Xincho's job better and also enables a couple of other teams. But I don't think she defines the meta, but she's definitely a must pull if you like her playstyle, as running around with her E is insanely fun. And next to that we're gonna rank Xincho. Now Xincho is amazing, so I'm going to put him in Insane. He applies Hydro amazingly well, and Hydro is such a strong element. Having Xincho in your team is just really nice. He's always been a staple in any Hu Tao team, and he's going to remain that way, and that's why he's an Insane S. Now Kokomi. Now, I personally don't have Kokomi, but I have seen a lot around Kokomi, and I think she is going to be at the same spot as Yelan, which is on the top of Insane, but behind Xiao, I think. Kokomi has incredibly appreciated in value. She has to be one of the best units in the game. I really think she fills a unique role with applying Hydro insanely well and being a healer. And honestly, I think she could slot in meta defining, and she is going to be once she gets even more teams to work with. She is such a... I think she's above Xiao actually. She is such a generalistic unit. She is amazing and going into S for that reason. Next up, Ayato. Ayato does a very similar thing to Tartaglia, but he doesn't have the Tartaglia International team potential that he has, and also doesn't have the utility of the bow. And that is why I am slotting him in a solid S. And last, Mona is a strong A. She gives your team a huge damage buff, is in general a nice damage buffer, and also applies Hydro pretty well, but isn't too reliable in her Hydro application, and for that reason gets a strong A. Next up, Dendro. And Dendro doesn't have a lot of characters, but we're gonna start with Nahida, who deserves to be in the meta defining category. Nahida is meta defining, it's as simple as that. She is the best Hydro application unit at the moment, and she is incredibly strong. Next up, Cole is a decent B. Cole didn't really break through the Dendro meta, and unfortunately ended up being a alright character at best. Tighnari gets a strong A. It's fine when you lose your 50-50 to Tighnari, but for a standard banner character, he definitely takes the cake, I think, for one of the better standard banner characters. But honestly, Nahida is currently the only amazing Dendro unit, except the Dendro Traveler, going into a strong S. The Dendro Traveler has shown that the Traveler can definitely be strong, and I like seeing a little bit of Traveler power creep, so I'm a big fan of the Dendro Traveler. Next up, Geo. First of all, Albedo. Now, I personally would like to put Albedo in a strong S, but I think Albedo is the top of A. He is reliable, and he is really good, and he is exceptionally good in Geo teams. Works great with Elemental Mastery, because he actually buffs your team in Elemental Mastery, but unfortunately just comes short in utility, because his elevator is too easily destroyed by bosses, and that causes it to be quite difficult to use in a lot of content. Next to that we have Ito. Now Ito is the reason that 5 Geo teams are allowed, and for that reason I think Ito deserves to be in the lower tier of Insane S. The 5 Geo teams are quite good, and I think he is really good in them, and he is the reason that they can exist. It's a great team, but currently elemental reaction teams still have the edge over Geo in general. Next up, Yunjin. Now Yunjin is definitely a strong A character. She can definitely buff specific characters to be a lot stronger, and she does a really nice job at that. But for the rest, she doesn't do a lot of extra things. Now Ningguang. Now, I've seen some absolutely insane Ningguangs, but I think I'm gonna put Ningguang and Nuel both in the middle of these. They're great Geo damage dealers, and they do that job really well, but honestly, they don't really stand out, and Ito is just straight better, to be honest. And for that reason also, Goro is going on the high end of decent B, as he only really enables one team, and he enables that team really well, but for the rest, he doesn't do that much. Next up, the Geo Traveler. I'd say the Geo Traveler is a decent B, on the lower end of a decent B. She gives a nice crit buff and does good damage, but not outstanding again. But now we do have an outstanding Geo unit, Zhongli. Now I know slotting in Zhongli is a DPS loss, but I think Zhongli is still such a convenient unit. Freezing enemies with his elemental burst is really nice to enable your team to deal more damage. His shield is just convenient, and if you are not completely keen on dodging consistently, Zhongli is your way out. And for that reason, I think Zhongli is in Insane S tier. I know he's a DPS loss, but I think he still gives you more DPS by opening more time for you to attack. And then next up, we have the Electro element. Now for the Electro element, we're gonna start with Lisa. Now Lisa has definitely become decent at B tier, together with the Dendro unit, because she really appreciated with Dendro and can now hit harder. She is pretty fun, not insane, but pretty fun. Together with that we have Cyno. Now I think Cyno is an incredibly fun unit, and him ravaging enemy teams feels great. But honestly, he isn't insane. He might appreciate with more new Dendro units, but currently he's pretty alright, and he deserves to be in a strong A. Kujo Sara is an interesting kid and is only good at C6, I think. And for that reason, she gets to go into B tier. I actually use her a lot because I think she's quite strong, but unfortunately she hasn't really shined too much due to her constellation need and just being outshined by Bennett. The Raiden Shogun is a meta defining unit. Now honestly, I think Tartaglia deserves to be at the back of this line, and the Raiden Shogun is definitely up here. She does a lot of things for your team. She speeds your team up, which is amazing. You can cast more elemental bursts. She gives you a great off-field damage buff, and her damage herself is just insane. She gives you way too many buffs and has no business with having this much utility while also having this much damage. Now talking about the Raiden Shogun, her companion Yai Miko is definitely going into the middle part of S tier. She has really appreciated with Dendro, and I like what happened with Yai Miko, and it's great that her gameplay and her teams have definitely improved. She is actually a character now, and that's great to see, and for that she deserves to be in the middle of S. Now Razor is unfortunately gonna be our first meh. He is just outscaled by almost every electro damage dealer, and unfortunately there are so many better teams even with 4 stars included. Same with Dori, going into the lower part of decent B. She is quite fun, but unfortunately outclassed by Cookie Shinobu, who deserves to be in the S tier. I think next to Faruzan. Cookie Shinobu is really good. I think she enables so many different teams because she is currently the only electro healer, and for that reason she gets to be in S tier because Hyper Bloom has become amazing, and a team like Tartaglia, Nahida, Kazuha, Cookie Shinobu just absolutely destroys. For that same reason, because of Dendro, Keqing gets to be right next to her. Keqing absolutely appreciated with Quicken, just like Yai Miko did, and now is in an insane S position because she can actually deal great damage. Unfortunately, a character that didn't get much better with Dendro is Beidou, who currently sits at a comfortable decent tier. Beidou is pretty decent. She's definitely really fun though. For fun she gets bonus points, but she is a decent character overall. Next up we have Fischl. Now Fischl gets to be in the strong A. Fischl has always been a staple for any electro reaction teams or any electro teams, and she does really well in them and just applies electro really well off field, and she is just a great third slotter because she is always useful, always dealing damage, and also quite fun to use as you can transform into the bird and fly around. But next up we have Pyro, but unfortunately our first meh. Amber. Amber has never really been good. Her taunt isn't very effective. Her elemental burst is very good in niche situations, but does nothing in most situations. And unfortunately, she's just very meh. However, a character that is not meh is Yanfei. Yanfei is quite a good Pyro DPS, and I've seen some Yanfei mains absolutely destroy Abyss 12 with her. She needs a large amount of investment and definitely needs really good stats to work, and she is outclassed by a couple of the 5-star Pyro DPS. But all in all, Yanfei is pretty good, and you can definitely have fun with her. Now, a Pyro DPS I think deserves to be in the insane S tier is Yoimiya. Now, Yoimiya just has a couple of things going for her that make her really good. First thing is ease of use. Because she isn't that hard to use, she is harder to mess up and thus it's easier to deal her damage consistently. Next to that, single target damage from range is absolutely amazing in Abyss right now. With all the bosses we're getting, having a bow user is very convenient. Last week we had the Thunder manifestation who Yoimiya absolutely whooped. And this week we have the big Ruin Guard bird, which she also deals with really well. All in all, Yoimiya is just a great damage dealer, and she's really cool as a character. I also think her gameplay is kind of satisfying, even though it's just LMB. Next up, Bennett. Meta defining. I think Bennett is meta defining. Everyone has a Bennett. He does two things in one. He's two characters in one. He's a damage buffer, and he buffs your damage by a lot. And then he's also a healer. So he's just two characters in one, and that makes him that good. Now, a strong A character is going to be Klee. Klee is slow and clunky, but can definitely deal some really good damage. And with how widely available Hydro application is now, you can make some really good Klee teams. Unfortunately, her synergy with Anemo is not as good as I was hoping it to be, and for that reason, she is on the bottom of strong. Together with her is Diluc, because I think they take quite a similar position, as they are outclassed by other Pyro DPSs, but Diluc is a little bit more versatile and has some definitely great Virgin teams. But in general, I think there's better options for Pyro DPS. Like Hu Tao, who deserves to be on the higher end of Insane tier. Hu Tao deals amazing damage. She is probably the best Pyro DPS right now, if it wasn't for this character, Xiangling. Now first on Hu Tao, she's a great character, great fun, but I think Xiangling gets the +1 on her. Why does Xiangling get the +1 on her? She works in a lot more teams, and Xiangling is so strong because she's never on the screen. But while she is not on the screen, Pyronado just deals an insane amount of damage, and also she is really easy to build, because you need Emblem on her, and she can use every single pole arm for great results. And also combined with that, Xiangling just does work with every stat. If you get EM it works, if you get energy recharge it works. She does really well with these stats. Now to finish off Pyro, Xinyan, unfortunately, her shield never really impressed me that much, but Pyro application hasn't been that good yet, so she gets a B. And Thoma, unfortunately, is meh. He has some good Virgin teams, but I haven't really been able to get any use out of him, even at C6. Now lastly, we have the Cryo element. Now for Cryo, we're gonna start with Ayaka. And honestly, I'm either going to put her on Insane or Meta Defining. But I think in the top tier of Insane is where Ayaka belongs. She does crazy damage and is by far the strongest Cryo damage dealer at the moment. But has some shortcomings in her ultimate being difficult to aim and also her requiring heavy investment or some constellations to really make use of all the parts of her kit. Now we have Shen-He, who gets to be next to Sino in the strong A. Unfortunately, Shen-He hasn't really been able to shine yet, because we don't actually have that many Cryo damage dealers at the moment. And she is really only good if you're buffing a Cryo damage dealer. Great with Ayaka though. Next up, Eula. Now, I really like Eula, and I think she is going to be on the bottom of Insane S. Eula was amazingly strong when she was released, but she hasn't really appreciated over time. She is still the same character that she used to be, and because she doesn't really like elemental reactions, she hasn't appreciated at all with any new characters or with Dendro being added. So unfortunately now, she's on the bottom of Insane, while still being really strong. And then Ganyu. Now personally, I am not the biggest fan of Ganyu's gameplay, as I think just shooting charge shots is kind of meh, and I wish her C6 was part of a base kit, because that is really fun. But no one can deny that Ganyu is one of the best damage dealers in the game, and that is why she gets into the middle of the pack of Insane. Now next up, we have Qiqi. Now for Qiqi, I don't want to put her in meh. Look, just because you lose 50-50 to a character doesn't mean they're instantly terrible. Chi-Chi is okay. She can definitely heal, just like Barbara. And I think Barbara is actually better, but Chi-Chi can heal pretty damn well and actually deals some impressive damage with the Ocean Youth clan. Now, higher up in decent, we have Chongyang. You can have some really fun teams with Chongyang, and he does great as a Cryo applicant and making your team infused with Cryo. All in all, he's a fun character, has some creative teams, and he fits in the decent category for that. Together with him is Rosaria. Her crit buffs are nice, but the Cryo application currently is pretty okay, and she is mostly used as a battery. I think she's either a low tier strong or a high tier decent, so I will put her in a high tier decent. But you know who goes into the middle tier of strong? Diona. Diona is currently your best free-to-play shielder, and with that I will also rank Layla. Now people have been testing Layla, and I think Layla is pretty okay, but I want to put her into decent. Diona has the advantage of being able to both shield and heal really well, filling two purposes in one, and also gets amazing with more constellation. While Layla has a really nice shield and good Cryo application, so they're both great shielding alternatives if you don't have Zhongli, and if you need to tank a hit. Diona is great. I really like her Cryo application. Next up we have Kaya. Kaya is actually really good in some teams, and I think he fits straight next to Chongyang at a decent B tier. He's a great 4-star character. He does what he needs to do, but he does it decently, and is obviously outshined by a lot of the 5-stars in the game. And then finally we have Aloy, who goes into meh. Now we have missed two characters, which is the Anemo Traveler and the Electro Traveler. Now I will put the Electro Traveler, in this case, into decent B on the lower ranks, and the Anemo Traveler would also deserve to be in decent B. I think both are alright and have their niche usage. If you have 0 Anemo units, I'd recommend building the Anemo Traveler and giving him 4-piece VV, and it will work out great for you. So now, but let's pretend this is the Dendro Traveler. Now, if we look at the order of the units, I think this is pretty alright. For the meta tier, I think personally Kazuha is the best unit in the game. Followed by the Raiden Shogun, because she speeds up your team a lot. Followed by Nahida. Followed by Bennett, actually followed by Zhangling, and then Tartaglia. For the S tier, I think this is pretty alright, as Ayaka is just insanely strong. Ayato is also amazing here, and all these units in between do really well. I think Scaramouche is gonna tie with Xiao as just a really good Anemo DPS. And I think all these characters just make teams much stronger. But to be honest, if you are building any character on this list that is not in the mech category, I think you can clear best 12 with them. And what is most important to say about this list is what I think about the characters. And to be honest, I've pulled many characters that are on the strong A list, like Sino, like Albedo, just because I like the character, and that is what is most important.